Now friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. The Rebellion versus the Empire, the ultimate underdog fight that made Finland versus the Soviet Union in the Winter War seem like a fair match. What made the Rebels and the Empire so unevenly matched was the sheer size of the Imperial Navy. Now there is very little information about just exactly how large the Galactic Navy was, mainly because this was highly classified information. As large as the Galactic Navy was, it was just a small drop of water in the bucket that was the Galactic Empire's entire territory. And no, the Emperor didn't want you to know that. The Imperial Navy had a ridiculous amount of systems it needed to patrol. Nonetheless, we'll be using all the information that wasn't purged from the archives by the New Republic, along with our own understanding of military structures here on Earth, to make some very questionable and probably not that accurate assumptions about the size of the Imperial fleet. We also have a dolphin hooked up to a car battery. We're trying to figure out how it's able to break into our office and use its highly evolved brain to steal our Wi-Fi password, which it used to watch mating videos on the YouTube. Did you know that dolphins are able to utilize more than 20% of their brain at the same time? If humans did that, we would just have seizures. I'm not really sure how this information is going to help this video yet, but I'm sure it will. So let's talk about numbers. What do we actually know about the Galactic Fleet? One of the most widely circulated numbers is 25,000. That's 25,000 Imperial-class Star Destroyers. Now some of you might be thinking, wow, that is a crazy amount of ships. But let's think about it. When compared to how many planets there are in the galaxy, is 25,000 starships actually that large of a number? Just how many inhabited planets are there in the Galactic Empire? Well, there are some very stark resemblances between our own Milky Way and the Star Wars galaxy. They are both similar in size, about 100 to 120,000 light years in diameter. They both are spiral galaxies, and judging by the distance between the stars and type of stars, both galaxies are similar in age. We can also assume that the Star Wars galaxy has a similar amount of stars as our own galaxy, which is around 100 billion. Now, not all stars have planets around them or planets that can handle life, but according to NASA, 1 out of 5 systems observed by their Kepler spacecraft have a planet that falls within the habitable zone. That's around 20 billion potentially habitable planets in the galaxy. Now obviously there are a bunch of different factors that will determine just how many inhabited planets are in the Galactic Empire. For one, they only control the center of the galaxy. The outer rim, unknown region, hut space are just a few places they have no influence at all. Most maps depict the Empire as only a small fraction of the entire galaxy. And then there's the possibility there just aren't enough sentient beings to inhabit all of these planets yet. While things in the core world might be a bit crowded and well developed, the further out you go towards the edges of the galaxy, the smaller the colonies will become and the more uninhabited planets you will find. So as far as canon goes, there are no official number of planets for the Galactic Empire, but in Legends we do have a concrete number, and that's 1.5 million member or conquered worlds, along with 69 million colonies. I consider that actually quite a conservative estimate. So let's go back to our previous number, 25,000 Imperial-class Star Destroyers. So what is an Imperial-class Star Destroyer? Well, it's more than just a ship of the line. It's very different from any ship we have here on Earth. It's part battleship, part aircraft carrier, part mobile command center. The Imperial-class destroyer has a crew of over 9,000 officers and 27,000 enlisted men. On top of that, it has an entire legion of stormtroopers. Ships also have special personnel like diplomats, politicians, engineers, scientists, special forces that can handle a wide assortment of scenarios. The Imperial-class Star Destroyer was an elegant solution to a very vast problem. As we mentioned before, the Empire's territory is vast, and simply put, these Star Destroyers oftentimes were left alone. They had to be self-sustainable and able to handle almost any type of situation. So the Star Destroyer was not only a ship, but a mobile base that could expand its influence across a vast amount of space. One Star Destroyer could control an entire planet, or an entire system, or even an entire region. Its turbo lasers could be used for orbital bombardment and collective punishment. The ISD also had a contingent of support vessels, fighters, and armored vehicles, along with its stormtrooper legion. It had a military-class hyperdrive, which allowed it to travel many light years within a day, which gave it a very wide combat range. But the ISD was only deployed in the largest and most troubled regions. A backwards world like Tatooine would never have an ISD stationed there unless, say, some droids with secret schematics vital to the Imperial war effort landed on it. The ISD was also sometimes deployed to important resource-rich planets like Jakku, which had a huge amount of kyber crystals. So let's say the 25,000 Imperial Star Destroyers were mostly deployed on the 1.5 million member and conquered worlds. That's roughly one Imperial-class Star Destroyer for every 60 planets. This is why during the Battle of Endor, the Empire didn't just send 1,000 ships to crush the tiny rebel fleet. They could only send a few dozen because every ISD that was taken off its post meant 60 worlds did not have any Imperial forces subjugating them. Now, obviously, not every world was a trouble spot. There were plenty of pro-Imperial worlds, and especially in the core region of the galaxy, that didn't necessarily need an ISD above its orbit. But nonetheless, the ISD were an integral part of maintaining the peace, and for the most part were deployed for defensive reasons, and not used in offensive campaigns. Of course, the ISD wasn't the only ship in the Galactic Navy. As a matter of fact, it was outnumbered by a variety of smaller ships. The Imperial Navy was organized into sector fleets. These usually were made up of 6 Star Destroyers along with supporting carriers, cruisers, picket ships, and support ships. There were even smaller groups known as Task Force, which were created centered around smaller ships like cruisers or even frigates. These task forces were mainly used to patrol the 69 million colonies that were way too small for an Imperial-class Star Destroyer. There's no way telling how many of these smaller support ships there were, but it's most likely for every Star Destroyer there were at least a dozen or so supporting or escorting ships deployed alongside it, not to mention dozens of starfighters. And at the other end of the size chart, leading multiple sector fleets, were over a dozen Super Star Destroyers. So as we found out, it's really hard to do a video like this. We went into this video not really knowing whether we would find an answer or not. And as you can see, the results are a bit mixed. Our concrete numbers are 13 Super Star Destroyers, 25,000 Star Destroyers, and potentially hundreds of thousands of cruisers, frigates, carriers, corvettes, and other smaller crafts. And that's just the Imperial Navy. We still have the Imperial Army, the Stormtrooper Legion. The point is, the Galactic Empire Armed Forces was massive, but the Galactic Empire's territory was even larger. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. We tried our best to find out what the numbers were. In our next episode, we're going to be taking a closer look at the Rebel Alliance fleet and exactly how large that fleet was. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss out on that video. Thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.